Hello and welcome to the Cinque F1 Esports Championship. Today you join us for round 5 here at the Hungaroring in Budapest. And it is a rainy day by the looks of things. We haven't seen this kind of weather since round 1 in Austria at the Red Bull Ring. Now, the format is highly unusual. We have 18 minutes of qualifying, followed by half race length. So it is really short, but really quick and loads of action nonetheless. We already have our first car exiting the pit lane at the moment. Last time we had this much chaos and this much, well, sorry, not chaos yet. The amount of rain that we've had before, it was a really shocking race. It was quite interesting to watch, to say the least. But yeah, hopefully today the weather will clear up by the time we hit the race. Doesn't look too bad, but of course it is very different looking from the commentary box and from the grandstands than it is looking from the car. Looks like everyone obviously making use of the time available, almost everyone out. And we'll take this opportunity while everyone's on their out laps to introduce them. So, right at the top is going to be well, let me start off, with a disclaimer. It's really interesting. We have the drivers and their actual names, and then we have their usernames. And unfortunately, all we can see is usernames. So, to make it easier for you guys and for myself, I'll only be referring to the drivers by their usernames. So, starting from the top, I'm going to come up with a short kind of word based on kind of their username that's somewhat recognizable, just so I don't have to say the whole thing all over again every single time. So from the top, well, this obviously isn't the order they're qualifying in yet, but from the top it's Papa, then we're going with Akka, then 3 is George, 4, we'll call him Sully. I think he's a new driver to the championship. Then in P5, Hollow Chicken. P6, Zillify. P7, Keegan. P8! Oh my goodness, that's Akka already into the back of someone right at the start. That's Zillify and Akka coming together on turn 2 already in qualifying itself. Wow, that is highly unusual. We've only ever seen drivers impede each other during qualifying, but never actually collide. I'm guessing the rain probably has something to do with that, or maybe there is something between these two we don't know about. That was kind of a second tap as Akka was recovering from that little collision, and of course his wing's gone, so he has to make his way around the track really slowly now because he has no grip whatsoever. So getting back to the names list, P7 Keegan, P8 Ryan, also a new driver, P9 Pagadala, and P10 Kunga. Now if you've been with us for a while, then you'll know who to watch out for. Obviously, George is a relatively fast driver, P3 in the championship. This is him right now. We are on board with George as he makes his way around the track for his first flying lap into turn 12. Then the next big name to watch out for is going to be Hollow Chicken. He, in fact, qualified pole last race and went from P1 to P1. He just stayed ahead the whole race. Really boring race for him, and a dominant performance from this driver. He is also currently P2 in the championship as he goes slightly sideways into turn 14. And you can see he's really pushing the limits of the car, and that is why he is up at the top of the championship leaderboard. Then, all the way down in P10 is Pagadala, who seems to change his livery almost every race, which is really quite refreshing to see. I have something with liveries. If you've watched some of my previous streams, I might not have mentioned it as much, but when I do my GT3 streams, we have a lot that we can do when it comes to liveries, and so usually I spend the whole of practice just salivating over them, but of course we don't have the time for that here, and there isn't really too much that you can do to liveries on F1 24 at the moment. But Pagadala then is our current championship leader and all-round race winner. He has won, I think, 3 out of the 4 races that we've had this season. So he's definitely one of the top drivers out there on the grid. Just struggles a bit with the consistency during race. as he comes round to the end of his outlap. Now we're already seeing some competitive times up from our top 4. George with a 127.7, Keegan with a 127.9, and I just realised we don't have the graphic up. Let us change that. There we go, now we can actually see, and it seems as though everyone's coming in for a little tyre change maybe. Thought, I'm going to try this on some slicks, and it hasn't worked because it just keeps getting wetter and wetter. So our top 4 then is George, then Keegan, then Hollow Chicken, and then Papa, with Ryan bringing up the behind at the 128.7. And it is really quite close between Keegan and Chicken. There's only about 8 hundredths separating these two. Hollow Chicken now on a flying lap. Let's see how he does. Keegan has just come into the pits, so this is Chicken's opportunity to improve. Going wide through turn 4. He's a 10th off of his time through sector 1. Coming into the chicane of turns 6 and 7, cutting all the curb that he can, and he's going to be looking for that wet line now. Obviously there is going to be loads of rain, loads of water on the track, so it's all about trying to find the grip in the tricky conditions. He has managed to improve by a 10th and a half. Now let's see whether he can carry through that progress through to the finish line and see whether he beats Keegan and takes P2. And of course there is the opportunity to take pole. Excuse me. He needs to improve by about 2 tenths coming across the line. Yes, he does. 3 tenths, in fact. Hollow Chicken now into provisional pole, the 127.6, and that was on slick tyres, and you can see how slippery that turn 1 is on those slick tyres. But it is brilliant to see the race technique. Is locking the rear, is trying to get rotation on the brakes, and then he can just floor it and send it through the exit. Get the power down nice and early. Some good awareness from whoever that was out ahead. We do have Keegan coming out. He's probably going to try and respond to Chicken's lap times. Now another big name is of course Keegan, who is P3 in the current qualifying leaderboard, and he did perform really quite well last race, qualifying fairly high up, having a difficult start and then doing an entire recovery run until eventually he managed to secure P3, but unfortunately right at the last moment he retired from the race, and I still have no clue how it happened. But himself and George both retired in the last 5 or 6 laps. Oh my goodness, and Aka suddenly comes out of nowhere. Aka now into pole with a 127.0. And still running slick tyres. Oh my goodness, and you can see he's on the limit. Fortunately, it doesn't seem like he's broken anything major. Maybe just lost a tiny bit of his front wing. Let's see if we can spot any damage. Yes, the right front winglet is gone on that car. But he has made a statement. He has said, I am here to race, I am here to take pole. And that is what he has done. So, I guess then it is time to see what the other drivers do. Keegan, we've just caught him at the end of Sector 1. Pretty much on par with his time, 200ths better than his previous lap. So Keegan currently P4. I think one of the drivers who will actually be able to fight for pole position. Papa, potentially. But considering that Papa only managed a podium last race after 2 DNFs and some lucky driving, I think... Ooh! I just saw a very juicy Sector 2 time. He's improved by more than a second. This could be a 26.9 from Mr. Keegan. And of course, if he does improve in his last sector, it could be even faster. Is this potentially pole position for Keegan as he comes round the final corner. Turn 14, now coming up onto the line. Does he take pole? Yes, he does, by a stunning 1.6 seconds. 126.2, and Pagadala beats that as well with a 123. How in the world has Pagadala done that? Well, I don't think that's really a question we need to ask. It's a rhetorical question. Once we look at what the tyre sides look like, I'm seeing green, which means those are intermediate tyres. He has finally gone for the logical option and gone for the wet tyres. And that is why Mr. Pagadala improves the pole lap time by about 3.2 seconds, which is very large considering we are about halfway into qualifying. Yes, the gaps will start to close now as drivers get used to the car, get used to the track, get used to the conditions. But yeah, I'm surprised at how long it took for someone to get onto the intermediate tyres. In fact, we do have the ability to check the tyres. Let's quickly go do that. Detail tyre compounds. You can see on the left hand side of your screen, everyone but Pagadala have donned the soft tyre compound, which is of course a slick. And that is definitely not going to help, I think. Ooh, in fact, Ryan has just swapped out for an intermediate tyre. So there is that possibility as well. We could see a sudden lap from Ryan, maybe taking P6 or potentially P5. So now we have 5 drivers all vying for the top position. Of course, Pagadala still out ahead by 2.5 seconds. Keegan managed to improve on his time by a fair bit, a 125.229. Same with George, a 125.9. So Aka and Hollow Chicken are the guys who need to change what they're doing. They need to change the pace. They are down by almost a second to 2 seconds. About one. Let's calculate this real quick. It's about 1.1 to 1.8 seconds. That's about the gap. They've got a 0.7 second window. So yeah, there is lots of potential for improvement. Of course, Pagadala looking very stable on those intermediate tyres, but it is a very slow lap for the man on provisional pole. 5 minutes left in qualifying. We've already been going for about 10-13 minutes. It has absolutely flown by. Now let's have a look at the other drivers. No, they're still on those soft tyres. Soft, and Hollow Chicken ducking into the pits. Now what we saw last week at Jeddah was that the drivers would kind of come in to the pits, change the tyres, go back out, come in, change the tyres, go back out, and that they would just keep doing that. Now of course they didn't know it was raining, maybe, I don't know. I picked it up within the first couple seconds of logging in, and I'm a spectator, so maybe I'm thinking now that these drivers know, okay, the conditions are such that we need to go wets. You know, it's up to them whether they want to go full wet, which will be the blue tyre compound, or just green, which is intermediates, which is what Pagadala is on. So I think for the last couple minutes, when they come in for the next pit stop, they're going to swap out for those wet tyres. So 3 of our top 5 into the pits. We are currently following Papa in P6. Of course, one of our podium finishes at Jeddah. Consistent racing from the driver in P6 at the moment. And what has gone wrong there? Maybe a bit of oversteer on the exit of turn 11? Maybe. Because that was very odd. And Pagadala just sets another personal best, another new pole time of 122.6. So those times will just keep tumbling within the top 5, especially from Pagadala. Aka has managed to improve his time by almost 2 seconds, really. He's now down to a 125.1, but still on that soft tyre compound. Hollow Chicken is just coming out of the pits. Ryan now with a sudden 123.3. We can see how well those wet tyres Well, you know, it makes sense how well those wet tyres do in wet conditions. Aka still improving, though, on those slick tyres. 0.3 seconds up from the first sector. But if he wants to beat Ryan to take P2 for the class, then he will need to improve by way more than that. So Ryan then, he's 0.7 seconds off the pole time, which is about the same gap as we had maybe right at the start when there were slick tyres on and everyone was doing the same thing. But now, of course, it changes. Aka still improving, almost half a second. Aka currently in P3. Now, if Keegan and George and Hollow Chicken come out with intermediate tyres, then of course Ryan will drop down the order. Same with Aka if he chooses to stick with those slick tyres. Comes across the line and another 4/10 improved. Now let's just have a look at what the other drivers are doing. Currently Pagadala. Oh, that is Ryan parked across the track. And that reminds me I need to turn on the track map so we can see exactly where that happened. That was the final corner. So Pagadala then, he's about the same time coming through Sector 1, improved just ever so slightly. Aka closing the gap now, 124.750. And then the second half of our top 6 still have to respond to the wet tyre laps of Pagadala and Ryan. Here's Pagadala now coming through the second sector, almost into the start of the third sector. Oh, getting all squirrely on the exit, and that has cost him just a tiny bit. Now, I'm interested to see, has Keegan, yes, Keegan has swapped out for the intermediate tyre, and he has improved by 0.8 already. He swapped out for the intermediate tyre, and you can see those results almost immediately, even on maybe slightly colder tyres than ideal. He's on a 125.2, that was on his slick tyres, and Pagadala improves yet again, a 122.496. He just keeps improving. Now, let's see what happens to Keegan. He's coming through turns 10 and 11 now. Also going to be coming through the second sector. No disruption from the orange car ahead. 1.3 seconds up from Keegan. Does he beat Ryan, or does he potentially take pole position? We have no idea. It's his first lap on intermediates. How does Keegan fare as he comes through turn 14? Is it going to be pole? Is it going to be P2? Is it going to be P3? Is it going to be an improvement? It's going to be P2 for Keegan. 1.9 seconds up on his previous time, 123.293. That's still, however, almost an entire second behind Pagadala. And now qualifying comes to an end. Ryan and Aka have set their final time. So Pagadala then has only one more lap to cement his lap time. Hollow Chicken has only one more lap to set an actual time. He's improved by 0.7. He still has loads to improve. He's coming into the final section of the race course now, into turn 13 and then turn 14. He only has another corner to go to improve on his time. Where does he end up? He's currently P4. Does he take maybe P3, maybe P2? Coming across the line, and that's Hollow Chicken for P3. Then, basically, our only drivers vying for the top positions are going to be Keegan in P2 currently, improving on his time massively. Pagadala in P1, but going slowly into the pits. So Keegan now is going to be coming through. George just took one position away from Aka. George now up into P5. Now it's Keegan coming across the line. How much does he improve? Does he take pole for the race? Yes, he does! Keegan with a final lap takes pole position away from Pagadala. Brilliant last lap lunge at pole position, and he has done it. Very similar to what happened at Jeddah between Pagadala and Hollow Chicken. Pagadala once again just setting that standard right through qualifying, and then it was Hollow Chicken at Jeddah coming through to take pole position, and this time it was Keegan. Brilliant performance from the man in P1. a relatively quiet qualifying for the top 10 from P7 downwards, as drivers struggled in the conditions. However, Keegan, Pagadala and Hollow Chicken decided, hey, we're going to slap on some intermediates. In fact, Hollow Chicken did not, and still managed to take P3. An incredible last lap grasp lunge at the pole position put Keegan on P1, taking it away from Pagadala. And join us now for the race start in just a few moments. So then, a gripping qualifying session towards the end of the session there. And the rain continues to pour here at the Hungaroring. Drivers preparing their cars, slipping on those intermediates, maybe wet tyres. And if you're wondering which intermediate is green tyres and blue is wet, full wet. And the only difference is that the grooves are maybe slightly deeper on the full wet. But here we go, the lights come on. And the green flag waves at the Hungaroring, and someone has already got a drive-through penalty. That's going to be Sully down in P6. He's already dropped a position straight from the get-go. And it is spray going up into the air as Keegan cuts across into P1, but Pagadala is alongside now, coming into P2. The battle for the lead has already kicked off straight from turn 1. Keegan now on the defense. Pagadala trying to go around the outside of turn 2. He'll have the inside line into turn 3. Oh my goodness, and they collide, and the race leaders are out already, right at the start of the race. Chaos then, right at the front of the grid, straight out of the gates, and there's already a virtual safety car, which means all the drivers will be locked in their positions. You can see just how closely George and Ryan are to each other. Ryan right up behind George ahead, and Sully behind, obviously with the drive-through. So a quick burst of action, and now things have all settled. Let's have a quick look at how that influences their position changes. So Hollow Chicken with a massive start, 2 positions up, 3 positions up for George. Akka, 5 positions up, and then of course Keegan and Pagadala now down in the last 2 positions, down 8 positions each. Now thankfully for them, the safety car is out, so that means they will somewhat be able to recover and maybe hit the pits without there being too much of a loss of time. But it still sucks for them, obviously. So it'll be interesting to see how they recover during the race. It'll be interesting to see how their recovery race goes on. And yes, Keegan and Pagadala both come into the pits, but then that means that Hollow Chicken, just keeping it clean and qualifying P3, has taken the race lead once again, just like at Jeddah. George now P2 as well. Ryan, who we are currently following, P3. And of course, straight from the get-go, we had Sully with a jump start, so he will have to serve that at some point. Sully with a massive start, of course, 5 positions up, but obviously due to that jump start. And we can see the safety car out ahead. So it is now full safety car as Keegan and Pagadala come straight out the pits. Now my question is, will they be able to form up behind the safety car and just keep racing? Because if they are allowed to do that, then brilliant. You know, that's not... There's minimal disruption to their race considering the circumstances. And I do see full wets on the side of Pagadala's car. Not sure whether I saw it on Keegan's. Let's have a look. Yes, those do seem to be full wets, and I mean, fair enough. I can see the water standing on the corner. So the safety car is still out. These two are trying to join up to the end before the safety car comes in. We have seen that safety car many a time before, particularly at Monaco. We can see the tyre warming techniques of Hollow Chicken there, trying to warm up his tyres. So yes, there we go. We can see the last two cars in the background forming up to this train behind the virtual... well, sorry, not behind the virtual safety car, behind the actual safety car. So that means everyone will be bunched up once again for essentially just a race restart. But this time, with Keegan and Pagadala right at the end, it was brilliant to see their action right at the start of the race. Of course, not ideal to have them crashing into each other out of turn 2. But great to see the side-by-side action through the second section of the DRS. Now, of course, that is usually enabled, but because of the weather, that will stay disabled unless the weather somehow changes drastically to the point where we have dry conditions at the end of the race. And as we still go around the circuit, thought I'd get a little bit of trivia for you guys. The first race of the Hungaroring was hosted in 1986, the first Grand Prix. It is 4.381 kilometers long, or if you like your miles and that kind of unit, is 2.7 miles round for one lap of the circuit. 14 turns, 6 left-handers, 8 right-handers, and of course we are doing half race length, which means that we will be doing 153.315 kilometers. And there we go, the notification from race control concerning the safety car coming in. And that is a penalty being handed out already to the two drivers at the bottom of the grid. Great to see the stewards on top of things. So, race restart. Let's see how this goes. Hollow Chicken, of course, starting right at the front of the grid. Then it's going to be George. Then it's going to be Ryan. Then Sully. Then Akka, Papa, Kunga, Zillify, Keegan and Pagadala as the racing gets back underway. Chicken with a magnificent start down the main straight. That is Pagadala already into the pits. Keegan going to be making a position on Kunga now. Seems like he's already made a position on Zillify. Where has Zillify gone? There he is. So looks like round the outside of turn 1. Beautiful move. And looks like someone seems to be dropping. Akka is dropping down the grid. Maybe having a tough restart. He's now under threat from Papa. He's just lost out to Sully as well. Ryan got past George right at the front. Keegan is making good progress. He's 2.2 seconds over Papa. And he's just overtaken Zillify. Zillify now overtaking Kunga down at the bottom of the grid. And here's Akka now down the inside of Sully. Into the chicane. Oh my goodness, and they tangle slightly. And that leaves Sully facing the wrong direction on the racetrack. Now Akka under threat from Papa. We've seen Akka's pace during qualifying. Will he manage to pull away from Papa? I think so. If not, then there is an issue with his car because he was struggling right at the start. Keegan with a magnificent start as well. He started in P9, now up to P6 behind the safety car. And somehow, don't ask me how, but Ryan has managed to get ahead of George. That happened while we were looking over at Akka and the action mid-pack. So he has somehow managed to get past the P3 driver in the championship. Could this be a new, faster driver? One of our new top 3 drivers on the podium regularly. Keegan making another move on Papa. He is closing the gap to the top 3 fast. Hollow Chicken, again, just struggling with the conditions, trying to find the grip, going for that new line. And he is slipping and sliding everywhere, but Ryan is keeping the car really stable. Coming through turn 4 now. And Hollow Chicken seems to be Chicken seems to be all over the place, while Ryan is just keeping a smooth, straight line. I think Ryan could be a potential race win contender here. Coming through turns 8 and 9, then 10 and 11. Into the final corner, could we see a move from the driver in P2 on P1 at the end of the main straight? He is very close now. I would usually say he's close enough to get DRS, and in dry conditions, yes, he would. Oh, Hollow Chicken going wide at turn 12. He's definitely feeling that pressure. Ryan now right on his rear bumper, 0.4 seconds separating them as they come into the final corner. Who has the better exit? Seems though Hollow Chicken has taken a slightly slower exit out of the corner. But of course, there is still so much that can happen, and Ryan seems closer than ever as they come through turn 1. And he is trying to close that gap. You can see the wet line developing there. Just a dry patch of track that all the drivers will be trying to stick to now. Whoa, and slightly wide from Ryan as he chases down Hollow Chicken. So what happened to George is my question. He dropped down a position. He lost out to Ryan, and considering Ryan's stability and his consistency, I don't think it's too much of a surprise. Looking further down the grid is, of course, Keegan making ground on Acker. He's now about half a second behind him as they come into turn 12. Now they're going to go into the long left hand of turn 13 and then onto the main straight of turn 14. Let's once again just compare the exits. You can see the trail braking. Very stable exit from Keegan. And Ryan is right up on the back of Hollow Chicken up in P1. Keegan down in P5, we are on board with right now, is trying to fight it, but Ryan right up behind Hollow Chicken, really close. This is the battle for the race lead developing right here. Ryan with a surprise lunge at the lead of the race. Coming through turn 4, of course these drivers need to be careful for track limits, which is of course still a thing even when it is raining. So it seems as though Ryan catches speed on Hollow Chicken through the first section of the race track, through Sector 1 and then Sector 3. So this is really the only place where Hollow Chicken is faster, but also it is the most defendable part of the circuit, and he has gone slightly wide through there. Let's see, half a second between Hollow Chicken and Ryan. Now 0.2 seconds through turn 13. Turn 14, the final corner. Who has the better exit out onto the main straight? Let's see. Still 0.3 seconds between the two, and Hollow Chicken just with a slightly better exit. Just consistently that slightly faster on the throttle. Looks like Keegan is closing the gap to Acker really quickly into turn 1. He has a look, but Acker's not falling for it, and there is a caution in Sector 2. We have to turn on the track map to see where that was and who it was. Still nothing between these two. Looks like Keegan has found his match in race pace potentially, or Acker is just really good at defending his position. It is not too difficult a thing to do round here at the Hungaroring, but up at the top it is again just 0.2 seconds between Ryan and Hollow Chicken. Ryan right on the edge of the curb, maybe tapping a bit of the grass there as Pagadala comes across the line, again just showcasing his speed, taking fastest lap. Of course that will change throughout the race session. Oh, and Hollow Chicken's out of shape. Now coming into turn 12. This is Ryan going down the inside of Hollow Chicken. And Chicken with good awareness there, but he's gone wide through turn 13. This is Ryan's opportunity down the inside. He's going to be down the outside into turn 14, but Hollow Chicken backs out at that precise moment to allow Ryan to take the race lead. Hollow Chicken was just feeling the pressure too much. His tyres were gone, so he decided it's time to just pit and not fight this battle any longer. So that means then it is Ryan, then George, then Akka, our top three at the moment. And Akka, in fact, just set fastest lap of the race. So he is putting a load of effort into his race pace. And considering he does have Keegan behind him, he's got enough motivation to do so. Now, of course, Pagadala and Keegan both came in for their pit stops right at the start of the race. However, I don't think there's too much that can be read in there. They might have to make another stop. Pagadala, though, made up a position from P10. However, his progress has not been as quick as Keegan's has. In fact, Keegan seems to be dropping away from Akka now. He's down 1.7 seconds on Akka ahead. And George comes into the pits now, which will allow Akka and potentially Keegan and potentially Hollow Chicken to come by. Now, I'm just interested to see what the tyre compounds are, because I think most of the drivers took intermediates to start, and in the pit stop they're going to swap out for wets. Let's have a look at the info again, shall we? Position changes once again. Ryan up 3 positions from where he started. He's probably going to emerge P2, which will be 2 positions up. Akka up 8 positions from where he started. But of course, as the chaos from the pit stops unfolds, we shall have to see how it goes. Ryan still to pit, Akka still to pit, Papa, Zillify and Kunga all still to pit. And actually everyone but Hollow Chicken and George are on wets. So it might be the overheating tyres, potentially. But I'm not sure. Pagadala closed that gap to Kunga from 11 seconds down to about 4 seconds now. And the field seems stable now as Ryan comes through the final section. I'm not sure what the strategy is here in terms of the pit stops, because yes, your tyres are going to be degrading the whole time, but considering it is wet conditions and these tyres are fairly rugged compared to just the usual slicks, you could potentially just go through the whole race without pitting. But of course we've seen the loss of grip on Hollow Chicken's car, and we see the results of a fresh set now with a 129.3 fastest lap from Hollow Chicken, and now the pit stops start coming in. So we'll have to kind of hold off on the summary of how things have been until the pit stop chaos is completely sorted out. Pagadala pitting as well. Now that is slightly odd. He's already had a couple pit stops. Now let's see what the race predictions are from our live chat. Apparently, Captain Batflash says George is going to win. Assassin ENR says potentially Keegan. Now, of course, that was before our lap 1 chaos, as Ryan now comes into the pits with a fast stop. It's a beautiful stop. We are seeing some support from Austin Jolly from Hollow Chicken as well, as he defended his position from that really stable Ryan. And looks like Sully also receives a 10-second penalty. That's his second penalty of the race. He had a race start infringement, so he jumped the start, and now speeding in the pit lane has resulted in a 10-second penalty. Really unfortunate for the man already down in dead last, P10, as the drivers now complete the 12th lap of the race. Still a ways to go before the end of this race. There's still plenty of action. Now, of course, this is slightly shaking things up with all the pit stops. Let's have a look at the position changes. Actually, no, let's look at the stops. That's going to be the most informative. So Hollow Chicken, George, Ryan and Aka, our top 4, have all stopped. So that's pretty much the order they're in at the moment, and that's not likely to change soon. Keegan with 2 stops, obviously the one right at the start, and then his normal stop. So actually our top 5 seem all ready to go, and Keegan now right up on the back of Aka once again. We saw this earlier. However, Aka seemed to pull away as the race progressed, so it'll be interesting to see whether Keegan manages to change it this time round. Having a look down the inside into turn 1, once again trying to maybe sell a dummy, maybe let Aka take a wider line, force him into a slower exit on turn 2, and then he can slip through for turn 3. You probably completely passed by turn 3. So this old battle between Keegan and Aka going down once again. Pagadala with 4 stops somehow. Not sure how that has happened. Then in terms of position changes, Hollow Chicken up 2 positions, George up 3 positions, Aka with an amazing 6 positions up. And Pagadala still the biggest loser, 5 positions down from where he started. Now I'm interested to see how George and Ryan fare. We've of course seen some support for George in the chat, but Luis, we didn't actually see how George succumbed to Ryan last time, so let's observe. Let's see whether Ryan manages to get past George a second time this race. He must have had a slow pit time, slow pit stop, even as it looked fairly quick. Coming around the final corner now. Going on board with Ryan. He's got the slipstream. He's going to be side by side coming into turn 1. Is he past by the time they hit the apex? Yes, he is by a mile. Can he get it stopped just in time? But this is now George potentially holding on round the outside into turn 2. That's Ryan slightly wide. He's off the dry line. It is still pretty much still on the hook. And that does seem to be Ryan past up into P2. So just caught the slipstream, was just close enough to get that extra bit of speed from George ahead, and then just pulled a classic one down the inside. That's Ryan up into P2. And while we were covering all of that action, Sully has retired from the race. There does seem to be a stationary car on the track, and I assume that is going to be Sully. Unless that is Zillify. No. So that was Sully in Sector 2 and Sector 3. Was parked across the line, and Keegan managed to get past Aka finally. He's now up 0.8 seconds. He needs to make up 5 seconds to George if he wants a podium finish. So then our top three, after all the chaos of the pit stops, turns out to be Hollow Chicken, then Ryan, then George. Some familiar names and a rookie up there as well. Then, of course, it is going to be Keegan and Pagadala, the other big drivers, trying to make up their lost positions. Pagadala starting P2, Keegan starting P1. So they have, of course, dropped way down the order from where they started after a lap 1 collision, a lap 1 crash. And then it is going to be Aka, Papa, Zilify and Kunga, the other drivers who have been fairly quiet throughout the race. But considering the gaps between Papa and Aka, that's about 30 seconds. And then from Pagadala to Papa, that's 7 seconds. Zilify to Pagadala, that's 23 seconds. And Kunga to Zilify, that's 18 seconds. So it is a larger gap than the rest of the grid. Ryan behind 6.2 seconds on Hollow Chicken. We saw Chicken was being slightly, inconsistent with Ryan behind him. But now we swap to the new tyre compound. I wonder how that has affected his pace. He does seem to be holding up. But of course there is nothing like that pressure of having someone right behind you. Someone there threatening to take the race lead away from you. So I suspect he's just going to be keeping a consistent pace throughout the rest. Just take it nice and calm. He's got the space to just think about things and to just keep going on autopilot. So Ryan will then have to push himself to try and close that gap before the end of the race. We're almost halfway through the race, another lap and a half to go. George, 1 second off of Ryan, but of course we've seen the pace difference between those two. So I'm not sure how that will work out for George. He will probably just drop. Keegan now 3.5 seconds. Keegan could potentially catch up to George and take the last podium position. However, Pagadala with the fastest lap time. He's now right up behind Papa, and we've just missed the overtake between these two into turn 1. So Pagadala on a rampage. He has been fairly good at his recovery runs lately. In fact, he did have a bit of a tussle with the mid-pack last race at Jeddah. For some other reason, he was a bit slow during the first couple laps of the race, fell behind, had a pit stop, reassessed, went on a massive recovery run, and after 2 DNFs managed to take P2. So yeah, very impressive performance from Pagadala previously. So he still has that fresh in his memory. I still have that fresh in my memory. So there's still plenty to be seen here today. Will he close the gap to Keegan? That's 37 seconds he needs to close. I'm not sure he can do it, but of course we'll just have to see how it goes. Can he close the gap to Aka? Aka has been relatively fast this session. Potentially. Keegan is faster than Aka, and Keegan and Pagadala were roughly the same pace. So I would put it down that Pagadala might close the gap to Aka by maybe 15 seconds towards the end of the race. Maybe close that gap by half. I don't think he's going to make it all the way. But if he does, he still won't make it up into P4 to take that position away from Keegan. Now, speaking of Keegan, he is 2.6 seconds off of George. So he is closing that gap really quite quickly now. To 2.8 seconds now for Keegan. Let's see if we can have a look at some of the stats, whether there is anything else. So position changes, Hollow Chicken, Ryan and George all up 2 positions. Keegan down 3 positions while Aka is up 5. So he's still the greatest kind of winner in this whole scenario. Then it's Pagadala down 4 positions, still the greatest loser. Zilify up 2 positions, Papa and Kunga down 1 position. Then in terms of pit stops, everyone has managed to stop. Keegan with 2 stops, Pagadala with 4 stops. Of course, these drivers were the ones involved in the lap 1 incident. And then the tyre compound. That's going to be Aka, then Papa, then Kunga on the full wets, everyone else running intermediate tyres. No penalties at the moment. Of course, Sully did have a drive-through right at the start after jumping the race start, and then a 10-second penalty for speeding in the pit lanes. I assume because of that he just retired. It just wasn't really worth racing anymore, which you never like to see. You don't like to see that kind of... It's not really quite a nice attitude, but at the same time you can understand their frustration. You can understand where they're coming from. So, caution sector 3. That does seem like Zillify and Papa tangling there for P7. But we are interested to see how the battle for P3 goes. We're currently on board with Keegan, who is gaining on George just in the foreground there. This is going to be for the final podium position. Zillify and Papa once again down in P7 and P8, swapping positions. And someone does seem to be in the pits. Not sure who that is, unless that's just the retired car of Sully showing up on the map. Keegan now within 1.5 seconds and closing of George just ahead. So Keegan, one of our newer drivers, who we have seen has loads of pace, gaining on one of our older, more experienced drivers, who has also got loads of pace. But Keegan does seem to be gaining very, very quickly indeed. 1.3 seconds now between himself and George. This is going to be the closest gap on the circuit, as everyone kind of spreads out and everyone gets their gaps together, or apart actually, you know, gets their pace together, gets their rhythm together, but their pace spreads out. That's the proper way to say it. So 1.5 seconds still between George and Keegan. Now also, something worth noting is Ryan has also managed to close the gap to Hollow Chicken by about 3 seconds as well. It was at 6 seconds before, so Hollow Chicken does seem to be struggling slightly for pace today. Pagadala, however, does not seem to be struggling with pace. In fact, he's already closed 8 seconds to Aka. He was at 31 seconds before, now he's down to 23. So we could potentially see Pagadala making an overtake on Aka towards the end of the race. Now Keegan's progress on George seems to have slightly stalled as well. Now about 1.3 seconds, and he is pushing, you can see it, while George just continues going forward. Ryan now down to 2.1 seconds, so Ryan closing that gap to Chicken really quickly. Is now down to 1.7 seconds. Keegan now 1.2 seconds. So it is close between the drivers of P1 and P2, and then P3 and P4. Keegan now almost a second. Is he close enough for the slipstream? Not quite yet. He's just out. It's just out of reach. We've seen Keegan and George race against each other for podium positions, but they didn't really tangle with each other too much in terms of actual on-track fighting. However, earlier in the race we did see Ryan and Hollow Chicken just before Chicken started the pit stop chaos. Chicken with a move down the inside after... No, sorry, that was Ryan with a move down the inside on Chicken after slightly wide exit from Hollow Chicken in P1. Ryan now within a second of Chicken, just ahead. Let's go on board with Ryan through the third sector, and we did follow these guys for quite a while, so it'll be interesting to see how this overtake happens if there is potential for an overtake. Ryan has been closing that gap, so it seems a bit dodgy if it didn't happen, or it would be such a shame if it didn't happen, considering Ryan's progress through the field and on pace tonight. And that is Hollow Chicken going slightly wide. He will have a straighter line on the exit. You can see just how quickly he leaves Ryan behind, but now it is half a second between Hollow Chicken and Ryan for the race lead. Once again, these two drivers battling for P1 in the race. Now 0.2 seconds between Ryan and Hollow Chicken coming through the first section, through the first sector. That is turn 2. Ryan already maybe having a look down the inside. He's deliberating. He's really close now. Down the inside into turn 4. Round the outside. Now with a switchback as Hollow Chicken goes wide. He's round the outside now for turn 5. Tries to get the cut back but has to back out. Intense racing for the race lead then between Ryan and Hollow Chicken, and this will just continue amping up as Hollow Chicken maybe tries to defend from Ryan. And of course, while all that's going on, George could potentially close that gap depending on the kind of, I don't know how to say it, kind of the intensity of the fight. Now through the final section, 0.3 seconds. Of course, let's see how the slipstream plays an effect on the main straight. We've seen Hollow Chicken's exits. They have usually been really quite good. And Ryan doesn't usually manage to catch the slipstream in time to make an overtake on turn 1. And this is a very typical demonstration of that. He's way too far back for a move. Oh my goodness, is it going to be move under braking? He's just got that car stopped in time. Now down into turn 2. There's the look from Ryan and they collide. Hollow Chicken and Ryan come together at turn 2. And Ryan losing out to Hollow Chicken now with a massive collision into turn 2. Crashed into him from the side. Now he's under threat from Keegan, who managed to get past George somehow. So while all that was happening, George and Keegan swapped positions. Now Keegan into P3. He's 0.7 seconds on Ryan. Ryan is potentially struggling with the damage from that crash he had with Hollow Chicken at turn 2. This is now Keegan right behind him. Let's go on board. Both drivers now on the limits of their cars, pushing them. Turn 13. Now, does Ryan come into the pits to fix the damage? Yes, he does. So Ryan then having to somewhat back out of the podium fight, which means now it's Keegan up to P2, Ryan down to P3. Does George take P3 away from Ryan again? Is there possibility for Ryan to still finish on the podium? I think so, but I'm not sure. Meanwhile, Hollow Chicken seems to be struggling. He's only 0.7 seconds ahead of Keegan. So a massive change in pace, and also we can see the track has slightly dried up. So you can see there's no distinct dry line. So is that maybe Ryan maybe taking a gamble and popping on the dry tyres right now? So Ryan emerging just behind George. Still this battle for the race lead going on between P1 and P2, Hollow Chicken and Keegan. But then there's Ryan and George once again having a battle for P3. And yes, Ryan has made that gamble. He's onto the softs now. Whether there was any damage to his car, I don't know. Could they have fixed that damage? I don't know. But at this point in time, all I do know is that Ryan has swapped out for slicks. And is that maybe George ahead also on slicks? Yes, it is. So George also pitted, and in the process managed to get ahead of Ryan. How does that work? And oh my goodness, Hollow Chicken just loses out to Keegan. And there's a looks like there's a massive battle going on for P2. No, they just swapped positions coming out of the pits. And changed positions again, so... Oh my goodness, could this be a four-way battle for the race win? Oh my goodness, and that's Hollow Chicken into the wall! Hollow Chicken losing a section of his front wing. And at the last moment loses the race lead. Oh my goodness. I cannot believe that has just happened. And he is struggling now on that new tyre compound. He's struggling to keep the car straight. So now it's Keegan, then George, then Ryan. Our top three, our podium racers. And that is a slow car somewhere on track. George, I think, having a slight spin out as well. So now that changes the order once again. Then it's Keegan, Ryan, then George. So now the DRS is enabled as well. 0.3 seconds between Keegan and Ryan. This has changed matters dramatically. The track has dried up in a matter of laps. It's dried up in, what, 4 or 5 laps? It has been so sudden. 10 laps remaining, and we suddenly have a massive race lead fight on our hands now between Keegan and Ryan. Keegan now back up to where he started. Ryan in P2 once again. And now the lap times will of course fall. Pagadala. Oh my goodness! That was Ryan almost into the back of Keegan, going straight on at turn 1. You can hear the DRS button being enabled. So wow. Now things have changed once again. The weather has dried up and everyone gets put onto the slick tyres. Now it's a case of how everyone adapts to the dry conditions. And Papa with a 10-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. Our third penalty of the race. Wow, a lot has just happened in the last couple laps. So Hollow Chicken, after hitting the pits with Keegan, has come out and then spun on the exit of turn 1, taken out his front wing, so he's struggling. He's essentially out of the title fight for the race, for the top 3 positions, for the podium finishing positions. Keegan taking then P1 obviously, George spinning out in the chicane of turn 6 and 7, allowing Ryan up into P2. Ryan now with DRS in the meanwhile. Is it going to be a move down the inside into turn 1? Let's see. Coming down into turn 1, he's still a far way back, but he's hugging that inside. They're side by side now on the exit. Neither of them has DRS. In fact, Ryan had the DRS, but unfortunately, he hit the grass, so he can't actually use that advantage. So Ryan then still behind Keegan. Meanwhile, George is closing that gap slightly. 1.3 seconds now between himself and George. Meanwhile, Pagadala continues on a rampage up the field. He's now only a second off of Aka, and then he'll be trying to close that 14-second gap to Hollow Chicken in P4. So wow, the last 8 laps of racing is going to be intense. Still about a second between Ryan and Keegan, 1.7 seconds between Ryan and George, and then an 11-second gap to Hollow Chicken. Pagadala now half a second off of Aka, so he's going to be making that move in a little while. I don't think Ryan has the DRS for the main straight. Let's just confirm that before we swap, because I want to see what Pagadala is doing. He's within a second of Aka down in P5. Let's see, so Ryan does not have the DRS. He's down to 1.4 second gap on Keegan ahead. Zillify now retires from the session. So Sully and Zillify have both retired from the race. This is now Pagadala. He's within a second as they pass the DRS detection zone. He's going to have that extra bit of top end speed as they come out the corner, but a dodgy exit means that he can't really use that to his advantage. Doesn't look like he actually has DRS, but he definitely is trying to make an effort. 0.6 seconds between himself and Aka. Aka just needs to keep a cool head. And so the gaps spread out slightly more. So wow, a little bit of a race position reshuffle as the weather changes, as the conditions change. So now we're on a completely dry track. Just over half a second between Pagadala and Aka, and you can see how consistent Pagadala is with his laps, how stable he looks, how in control of the car he looks. Keegan now, then Ryan with the fastest lap, and of course that will tumble as the drivers get used to the conditions once again. So Pagadala, maybe with a second chance at overtaking Aka on the main straight. He just needs to make sure his exit is alright, and he does seem to be within that second for the DRS. There's the beep, he's activated it, half a second, closing that gap now into turn 1. Slight defense from Aka, but ultimately doesn't hold up to Pagadala, who goes through, but ultimately just runs wide. So Pagadala trying to make the overtake, going wide. He's got the DRS into the second zone. Now down the inside of turn 2. Just enough space, and he puts Aka onto the grass. Aka back onto the track. Brilliant racing between these two for P5. And it's still kind of neck and neck into turn 4, and is that a collision between the two as they came into turn 4? Pagadala now up into P5, Aka down to P6. In that exchange, was there any bodywork that got left behind somewhere on track? I swear there is, but now it's Pagadala under attack from Aka still. And Hollow Chicken receives a 3-second time penalty. There's still brilliant racing going on between Pagadala and Aka for P4. Looks like Pagadala finally found his race pace match. Down the inside into turn 12 goes Aka, but nothing comes of it. He will have the DRS on the main straight. Is this then an upcoming move from Aka into turn 1? I'm not hearing any DRS. It is enabled, so we just need to trust it. Oh, and he's getting really close to the back. He will have the DRS a second time, but his exit is slightly flawed. And is that then Pagadala through and surely up into P5? I believe it is, but we shall have to see, because we saw how quickly Aka managed to make up ground on Pagadala through the second sector. Oh, and Pagadala slightly sideways, smashing the 100 board in the process. And 4 laps remaining in the race. Aka still 0.3 seconds, 0.4 seconds between himself and Pagadala. If he gets the exit right on the main straight out of turn 14, we could potentially see a move for P5 into turn 1, as long as he can just keep that gap close. He will have the DRS. Let's see how his exit is, using the downforce of the car. Now, my question is, how does Pagadala have DRS? That was very odd. Might be just that live delta between himself and another driver, but I think that is Pagadala up into P5 and there to stay. Aka struggling to keep up, but still within 0.3 seconds, so there is still this fight for P5 to kind of keep an eye on. But we also need to bear in mind Keegan and Ryan still fighting for P1. Oh my goodness, and that's Aka hitting the side of Pagadala, and Pagadala spun out on turn 5. And that put an end to that epic fight. Oh my goodness. So Aka rear-ending essentially Pagadala So, oh my goodness. So all Pagadala's efforts, his massive battle with Aka for P5, and that's how it ends. Really unfortunate for Pagadala. I don't see too much damage on the front of Aka's car. If he comes into the pits, we know he does have some damage, but he's not. So we're assuming he does not. And that is, I have to say, a sad ending to that brilliant battle between Pagadala and Aka for P5. 3 laps to go in the Hungarian GP here at Budapest at the Hungaroring. And Ryan has not managed to close the gap to Keegan. In fact, that's gone up to about 1.3 seconds between the race leaders. So Keegan then finding pace and managing to keep Ryan behind, who has been on a fairly good run. Now, we did have some of those race winner predictions up at the start, so it looks like we may have a couple of them come to be. And Keegan dropping fastest laps left, right and centre. George doing the same. George currently in P2. So it then quietens on the track as Keegan leads the field. And we do have the one supporter for Kunga down in P8, who has unfortunately been bringing up the rear of the field for a very long time. Let's actually see how he has been doing this race. Bring up the menu. So Kunga still on wet tyres, which cannot be doing them too many good. 5 stops from the man in P8, and he is on a net 0 loss of positions. So that is, I mean, interesting to say the least. Now, looking at the rest of the grid, Keegan back up to where he started, Ryan up 2 positions, George up 2 positions, Hollow Chicken down 1 position, Aka still the greatest kind of winner, up 5 positions, and Pagadala, of course, down 4 positions. Now, George has suddenly decided, I'm going to put some pace on Ryan. It's my chance to go round now. He's got a bit of DRS. Round the outside of turn 2, shown the outside by Ryan. Let's see how he does through the next section. Where has this come from? George suddenly finding pace on Ryan. All race, it has been the other way around. Ryan overtaking George twice. Now George wants to break even, and he wants to make an overtake of his own. We've only got 2 more laps of racing left, 0.2 seconds between these two. Is there a possibility for an overtake into the final section? If not, the pit straight. They are very close, and we've seen the consistency of both these drivers. And you can see Ryan already going defensive there through turn 12. George biding his time, and that is Ryan going slightly wide through turn 13, that left-hander. Now George round the outside into turn 14. Brilliant move from George, capitalising on the mistake of Ryan, and that is George then up into P2. But Ryan still has DRS. He will have DRS down into the first sector, down into turn 2. 0.3 seconds between the two now. Is it going to be a desperate lunge from Ryan? No, it isn't. So George now up into P2 for the race. Brilliant performance. It just suddenly came out of nowhere. I suspect because of that change of time so quickly, I assume Ryan made an error somewhere, maybe a bit of oversteer, and that allowed George to close that gap really quickly. Still 0.4, but that gap has settled somewhat as Keegan now coming through the final couple corners, then turn 10 and 11, then 12 and then 13, then the final corner of turn 14. And now through the final corner comes Keegan. He's been on a roller coaster of emotions, qualifying pole, stealing it from Pagadala, crashing out at the start, then coming straight back. Keegan wins the Hungarian Grand Prix as the checkered flag waves in Budapest. Brilliant performance from Keegan. George with a last lap overtake on Ryan, takes P2, and Ryan, wow, what a performance. He has seen this race, but unfortunately just could not make that stick all the way to the end to take P2. And then it is going to be a sad line across for Hollow Chicken, who was leading most of the race, but unfortunately just messed it up towards the end and has unfortunately just finished P4. Disappointing for the man in that purple and black car. Then it's Acker across the line, happy with his improvement, and then it's going to be Pagadala again, qualified pole, got pipped to it by Keegan, and now has to cross the finish line in P6 after such a recovery drive. That is Pagadala across the line, and the last driver to come across is going to be Papa, who's been in the middle of all this. We've seen him somewhere in the background. He's just been doing his own thing, coming across the line to take P7 of the race. Wow. This has been an incredible race. And the rain was pouring right at the start as Keegan started the race. Then it was Pagadala who qualified second, but then as the race progressed it was a roller coaster of emotions. Keegan and Pagadala coming together on lap 1 to crash, but then Keegan with a massive recovery drive back up into P1 to take the race win. Then it was George and Ryan constantly fighting throughout the race. Ryan with good pace, but unfortunately at the end just pipped by George on the last lap. Hollow Chicken also leading most of the race, but unfortunately losing out. That concludes our race here at the Hungarian Grand Prix. Join us in 2 weeks' time for the next one in Imola. Good night. We'll see you there.
Hello.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm perfectly good at the moment.
Perfectly good. That is what we love to hear. What a race it has been.
Yeah, what a race indeed. Crazy.
It was absolutely nuts. We had the, of course, the good start from, well, not, I wouldn't say good, but it was, it was entertaining to watch the two race leaders crashing at lap 2, corner 2, lap 1, and then just the massive recovery drive from Keegan. That was absolutely incredible to watch.
That was exhausting. Once it happened, I'm like, yeah, I'm done for. But I started pushing like crazy. Time to pit stop right. Just working with George, good team moment there. But yeah, it was a really good drive.
It was absolutely incredible to watch because it seemed like you had some really good pace. You were kind of doing great at the start, and then towards the end of the race, we didn't really see too much from you. And then just suddenly, as the rain stopped and all the pit stop chaos started once again, you just lunged up the field. And of course, with Hollow Chicken crashing out as the cars swapped to the 6, it was just nuts.
Yeah, I mean, once it went to the mediums, it was definitely a struggle. Ryan turned up the pace super well in the wet, fell off a little bit in the end, but he was holding me up for quite a bit there, some good racing. So
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Ryan. I mean, you're in chat as well. It was great to see you on the grid today. Is this your first race with us, I believe?
It's my first race ever on F124.
First race ever on 24. What? I
Yeah.
can't believe that.
I started driving this morning.
No
I downloaded the
way.
game last night. So I need to learn the game a little bit more. Maybe I could be a little faster. They were a second on faster than me in the dry when the mediums came on.
But in
So
the
I need to
wets,
be more faster.
you were just absolutely unstoppable. You overtook George twice after a bit of pit stop chaos, and then even towards the end, you had good pace. But what happened there at the end? It seemed as though the gap between yourself and George closed too quickly for it just to be purely pace based.
Well, I tried to let George through for the DRS. It didn't really work in my favor.
No, it did not.
No, it didn't work.
Oh man, and I mean, it felt. I mean, from here, it was as if you were pushing for the race win. You were pushing really hard. You were doing really well, and then yeah, just at the last second, you just got pipped down to P3, which I mean, it's still not bad. That's still a really good kind of. That's really good finishing position for your first race ever on F124, let alone in the championship. So yeah, I'd say really good performance. You looked like one of the most stable drivers out there today.
Bottling's been part of my job. Last weekend, on Saturday, I actually had an endurance race. I crashed out from the lead in the pit lane.
Oh mate, so it has just been kind of a week of loss for you at this point.
Yeah.
Oh man,
I got work on that.
your time will come, my friend. Your time will come.
Thank you.
And of course, George, you're also in the chat. Brilliant to see you just lunge at that position, P2 at the end. I'm sure you were waiting for that for a really long time.
Oh, mate, it's been two very, very bad races, very unlucky races for both me and Keegan. So this one too is it's a very happy feeling for us.
It's a redemption.
Yeah, a true redemption, really. Because after Monaco, just like Leclerc in real life, my season has gone terribly wrong. I had zero pace in the wets. I don't know what happened. Like the setup was not ideal. It was mostly dry, so I knew that risk going into the race. It was mostly a dry setup, and thankfully it paid off. At the final, like 2 to 3 laps of Inters,
Yeah,
me and
yeah.
Keegan gained a total of 4 seconds to Ryan and Daniele. So, and in the mediums, we were absolutely flying. Like we were exchanging fastest laps.
That was
So,
an
yeah.
absolutely mega last couple laps.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I'm sure,
And,
like when you got past Ryan at the end, you were like, yeah, you know, give him some of his own medicine. You know, I'll get my position back. Thank you very much. You're like, oh
Well,
yeah,
I mean,
finally I get past him.
Yeah, kinda, yeah, because he got past me in the second lap, right after the safety car went off, and I didn't have the pace to fight him, so I decided, just sit back, take it easily, and yeah, I should let the race come to me. And yeah, thankfully that worked out because I was running out of patience by lap like 27. Because in the first few laps on the mediums, because Ryan and Keegan were like together, and Ryan had the DRS after I made that mistake as well. Yeah, they were pulling away incredibly much. So I was a bit frustrated to not make it a 1-2 out of my mistake because I spun for no reason. But yeah, it's fine since I got that second place. And I told Keegan as well right after the race. He made a post about DNFing in Saudi, and I told him, oh well, it's gonna be 1-2 in Hungary either way. So yeah, it feels good to back that.
Oh, brilliant! And I'm sure you guys have got plenty of practice sessions planned for Imola in 2 weeks.
We have already started.
Nice.
We are practicing like since Monday, Keegan.
Yeah. Me and George,
I think.
we always do we always try to do like 3, 4, 5 lapper races, and the occasional, 25, 35%. Just on different tracks, work on passing, and
yeah,
it's definitely been an exhausting week on the sim every day. I'm leaving here in about a half hour and going to the track to practice my next podium race.
Yeah,
so it's definitely a busy next couple days coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah, those 5-lap races really help out for us because they help us, realize where the limit of the car is when we're pushing. So yeah, it's
Absolutely.
very important, and they actually came in very, very handy in the final few laps.
Oh man.
So yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure Ryan, you're going to be practicing hard as well, trying to get that elusive race win.
I also have another race to practice for, so it's going to be kind of split between those two. But race win will be.
I'm sure you'll be fine, especially considering this is not only your first race with us, but it's like your first race on F124 ever. I'm sure you'll do just fine.
My first F1 league race in general, actually.
But anyways,
That was
I
a
need
hell of
to
a
head
race.
off. So it was brilliant chatting to you guys, but we'll conclude it there, and we shall see you all in 2 weeks' time.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
see you in 2 weeks.
Sounds good.